When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite. Obey your thirst.
Oh, Hilton stay, your beds are soft and cozy. No lumpy couch, no stiff futon, no shower line at crack of dawn. Oh, Hilton stay, a holiday you're saving.
When you want holiday comfort you can count on, it matters where you stay. This season, enjoy spacious, comfortable rooms and friendly service when you book with Hilton instead. Hilton for the stay.
Hi, Nat Doig here. I just wanted to let you know that in today's very special festive edition of Weird in the Wade, which was recorded live at the Bigg Theatre back in November, I do mention some rather gruesome details about executions and gibbeting. It's sometime in the 18th century. So let's pick a date. Let's say it's 1710. Queen Anne is on the throne. There's been a hard winter and there are food shortages over that winter, which has led to riots in London. But it's summertime now, and we're in Luton, South Bedfordshire. We're just below a hill known as Galley Hill, because for as long as anyone can remember, this has been the site of execution. North of the town of Luton, the gentle rolling hills, including Warden Hill, next to Galley Hill, once marked boundaries between Bronze Age tribes. The ancient Icknield Way passes through these hills, and on the top of Galley Hill are the remains of 2 Bronze Age barrows, burial mounds for long-lost British warriors or royalty, perhaps. These sites were thought of as creepy and otherworldly by the superstitious Anglo-Saxons, first as places associated with the old pagan gods. Warden Hill could be a corruption of Woden's Hill. Then the Christian Anglo-Saxons associated them with pagan devilry, and as those who committed the worst crimes, like murder, were hanged on these eerie, God-forsaken hilltops. By the 18th century, some or most executions were moving into towns, to the jails. For notorious criminals, however, the worst of the very worst, these hilltops remained a suitable place to make an example of the criminals. Gibbeting was still common. This was where an executed body was covered in tar as a preservative, and then in some cases was cut up and different body parts were displayed around the county. Or the whole dead body was hanged again. And the gibbet at Galley Hill would have played its part in this gruesome act of deterrence. Some history books claim that the authorities in Luton were particularly officious. They were determined to rid their town of robbers and murderers. They continued this practice of gibbeting far longer than other Bedfordshire towns. It's a late August evening, dark and prematurely so, because of the great, heavy, iron-grey clouds hanging over the parched fields and hills. Thunder rumbles, casting fear into all who hear it. With thunder comes lightning, which can start fires in thatch and hay barns, and even in the dry fields themselves. In an instant, a single spark can ruin a harvest, lay waste to a town or village, and destroy lives. Just below Galley Hill, on the edge of Luton, a local farmer, John Marsh, is hurriedly bringing in the horses to his stables before the rain starts. It's still dry, but the clouds are about to deluge the countryside with rain and hail. He is sure of it. His son George is helping him.
Hurry, boy. The rain's going to start any minute now. I don't want Blessy catching a chill. I need her fit and well for next week.
George hurries with his work, for once not caring that his father is just standing there barking orders rather than doing any of the work himself. John is staring up at Galley Hill. He is certain that he saw movement up there, and not just the old tarred and blackened corpse which is gibbeted currently. This hideous cadaver is swinging and twisting in the gusts of wind, making it look as if it is still animate and attempting to escape. But no, he saw something move, something lower down than the corpse. George, having got Bessie, their shire horse, into the stable with the help of Simon, the stable boy, now stands next to his father, looking up at the hill as well. As both men continue to watch, a great fork of brilliant lightning strikes the gibbet, where the twisting body of the criminal hangs. The men's eyes swimming with bright splotches, they gasp as the huge crash of thunder batters their ears.
God's wounds!
John exclaims. Simon the stable boy cowers behind the two men. All three watch in absolute horror, fixed to their spots, unable to move. The gibbet has caught alight. After the lightning strike, flames flicker up its wooden frame and engulf the tar-covered body. It blazes like a beacon of old. Sparks fly from the tar and set the ground alight. The dry grass kindles instantly. Bright tongues of fire leap from tuft to tuft all around the flaming gibbet. But it is not the fire that has the men petrified, slack-jawed and motionless. It's the creature frolicking amidst the flames. A large, black, shaggy-coated dog is leaping and twisting its way through the inferno, its back arching as it leaps, performing agile acrobatics. It is not jumping in fear or pain. It gives out no yelps or howls. Instead, it is as if the dog is playing within the fire, revelling in its ferocious heat. The dog barks excitedly until the gibbet collapses in a pile of ash and flames. And then the flames die down. As the first fat, blood-warm drops of rain hit the three watching, the dog turns to look down on them. He is a giant of a beast, bigger than any natural breed of dog. His eyes are as round as dinner plates, burning a deep scarlet. He snaps back his neck and howls. The sound is like nothing the men have heard before, almost metallic, like great machinery grinding. Then the dog stops its noise and it slinks away into the darkness. The three men were not the only witnesses to this unnerving sight. Many in the town of Luton reported seeing the gibbet pierced by lightning and the appearance of a fearful hound that seemed to frolic through the flames. His howls were heard throughout the town. John Marsh would later say,
Its cries, they made my blood freeze. I could not move or speak for minutes after I saw it, nor could any of my companions. It was like the beast cast us in stone, bound us in silence and terror. We're the nearest farm to Galley Hill, and living just below it, we saw the beast up close. I tell you, it was a hound of hell. It had come to take that gibbeted murderer to his fiery depths. It's not the first time such a beast has been seen in those hills, but it was the first time it had been seen by so many. It was not the last time the creature was encountered either. My son and I, we've seen it since. Went out one winter's night, rescuing a ewe who was escaped our paddock. We had made our way up the galley in our search. Approaching the brow of the hill, we both saw the silhouette of a mighty hound against the moonlit sky. On this occasion, the dog departed before we could run away, because although I am no coward, I have no shame in telling you that I saw a hound and I would not approach it. A local midwife, Anne, I know as she was taking a shortcut in a hurry to a childbirth. She was almost jogging along the Icknield Way last summer, not long after the incident, when her path was suddenly blocked by a huge black dog. Its fur all rough and ragged. She said it stank of sulphur and bog. It turned its face to her, and its fangs dripped blood, the same colour as its fearfully large eyes. It snarled, and it snarled, and it backed off. It would not let her pass, and she was wise enough not to approach it, taking a more roundabout route to the mother in labour.
Over the centuries since, the black dog of Galley Hill in Luton has been seen on several occasions, though in more recent times it has morphed its shape into a large black cat, which has stalked the Bedfordshire countryside, with sightings from Luton across the county all the way to Potton, just 4 miles away from where we are now, and where the Potton Panther, as it is known, a large, sleek, slinking black cat, has been seen again this year. Thank you so much. Welcome to Weird in the Wade podcast recording at the Bigg Theatre in Biggleswade. And this is a really special episode. Let me get my prop. Merry Christmas, everyone. I'm Nat Doig, and today I'm joined by Owen Staton, a man who needs no introduction, but I am going to give him one. He is the creator and presenter of Time Between Times storytelling podcast. He is also an actor, a director, and one of the most wonderful storytellers that I have ever encountered. He is also the voice of the Richard Burton Heritage Trail. If you're ever in that part of South Wales, you can hear him telling you all about Richard Burton's life. Owen, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you.
No, you're really welcome. So, welcome to Weird in the Wade's Christmas episode. And what could be more festive than a demon dog taking criminal souls down to hell? But seriously, today's episode will feature not just demon dogs, but also creepy canines of all kinds, and from phantom pets to what my friend Tess has christened kindred canines and graveyard bar guests. Owen is going to tell us a wonderful story. It's one of my favourite folk tales of all time, but be warned, you will need a hanky. It is a little bit of a tearjerker. So the story that I told you just now is well known in Luton in Bedfordshire, and it's reported as fact in many histories of the town and also ghost story collections. I have searched the archives and newspapers, but I cannot find any 18th century news stories about lightning striking a gibbet in Luton. And you'd think that kind of thing would make the newspapers. But that's not to say that the story isn't true. In the 18th century, there were beginning to be local sort of county newspapers, but there weren't that many. So if it did happen in the 18th century, it might have gone unreported. But that's not to say, like I said, that the story isn't true. There were many terrible storms in the 18th century, including a tornado which affected Luton in 1703. Of course, the story of Luton's black dog could be much older, as the hills associated with Odin, Woden, or pagan gods seem to attract these kinds of dog stories as well. Dr. Francis Young, friend of the show, did tell us on a previous episode that an old name for shuck-like demon dogs was the galley trot. And so Galley Hill in Luton may have a much more ancient connection to dog myths. One thing that is never completely clear in these types of stories is whether the hellhounds or shucks are flesh and blood animals, like a cryptid maybe, or a phantom or a ghost. Of course, they could be a mixture of both. Some of the sightings might be cryptids, some of the sightings might be ghosts. But what I think they clearly are describing is a fairy dog, or what Dr. Francis Young has called a otherworldly dog. And they weren't always dogs. Big black beasts, or beasts of other different colours of many kinds, were reported, including cats, bears, goats, and even monkeys. The nature of these creatures is that they can shapeshift, including into the form of humans sometimes, werewolves. But werewolves are for another episode. Ghost dogs. One of the most common types of ghost seen or heard, yet very rarely explored or talked about, are the ghosts of our pets. Now, many pet owners that I have spoken to have experienced the phenomena of seeing, hearing, or even feeling their pet with them after they have passed away. On the episode about big cats and phantom felines, I shared stories about ghost cats being seen by their owners. Owen even shared a story about a ghost cat on that episode. So if you've not heard it, go back and have a listen to the Big Cat of Biggleswade episode. You get lots of Owen and you get ghost cats. I have experienced this with my own cat after they died. But with dogs, I wondered if it was the same or slightly different. So, Owen, I know you've seen a ghost cat. Have you ever seen a ghost dog?
I've not seen a ghost dog, but I've seen the way that dogs react to something that we can't see. And I think that's really important. I think maybe that's what we're dealing with when we talk about these dogs, these phantom dogs, these demon dogs, this thing. Are they operating on a level that we just can't see? I've got a lovely Springer Spaniel, her name is Betson, and we walk in the forest behind my house. It's a beautiful place. It used to be an old zoo, and there's a lovely old path that winds its way through the autumn leaves. And there's a little offshoot to that path that overlooks the Neath Valley where I live, and it's a stunning place. And at the end of that, there's a small bench, and I go and I sit on the bench, and Betson won't come anywhere near it. She sits about 10 metres back and will not come anywhere near the bench. And it's really odd. I've even carried her to the bench and she runs straight back. And, you know, I've been there with my old dog and she was fine, but for some reason, she doesn't like that spot.
It's not unusual, is it, to find those kinds of stories? And those who listen to the podcast and will know about Pegnut Wood and its spooky bridge. And I was there just the other day, earlier this week. And local dog walkers will say that their dogs will refuse to cross that bridge. There's many bridges in Pegnut Wood, but there's just one in particular that the dogs don't like walking over, and humans don't particularly like that area either. But yeah, it is really funny how dogs sometimes can sense things that we can't really understand.
Yeah, you're right.
Right. And we'll share a nice picture of Betson on the blog as well.
Okay,
Weirdandtheway.blog.
Yeah.
Seeing as I'm sharing a picture here behind me of my cat, Mr. Shoe. We didn't name him. He was actually Lord Shoe once we rescued him, and he was Lord Shoe because, yeah, he was that kind of cat.
He is actually massive as well, isn't he?
It's one of those pictures where he was nearer to the camera, but you can't realise. But he was a massive cat. And Cindy is not the size of a Labrador, but you'll find out about Cindy in a minute. So, ghost pets, ghost dogs. So my mum admitted that she has seen ghosts of our pets, though less often with the dogs. She, like me, has witnessed sort of ghost cats. But I did ask her about the ghost dogs. Had she experienced ghost dogs? And my mum is in the audience, so I think it's only fair for me to say that she thinks there is a rational, scientific explanation for why we see ghosts of our pets. But Mum told me that the most obvious ghost dog experience that she had was after our little dog Cindy died, and Cindy's there. She was a rescue dog, a possible cross between maybe a Labrador and a terrier. Maybe she had a bit of spaniel in her, I don't know. But she was actually quite small, and people would always think that she was like a Labrador pup. And she never really grew very big at all. Now, she was a wonderful dog, and she had a wonderful long life with our family. She was the bravest dog I've ever known. I was once taking her for a walk in the woods up in Doncaster when we lived there, and she launched herself at a much bigger, far more ferocious dog who was barking and snarling at me when we were on that walk. But after Cindy died, my mum said that she would often think that she saw Cindy out of the corner of her eye, or even feel her rushing past her in the hallway. And I experienced that too at my parents' old house. After Cindy passed away, I sometimes would think that I heard the back door handle rattling. And what our cats did was they taught Cindy, because she wasn't the cleverest dog, they showed her that if she leapt up and pushed the handle down, that she could get through the door, that it would open. The cat was clever enough to know what to do, but not big enough to reach. And so Cindy would sometimes do that. And I'd sometimes hear that rattling and think that it was her, and that, but this was long after she died. Now, if Kieran O'Keefe was here, and I always do feel like he's sitting on my shoulder whispering the rational explanation to me. So if Kieran was here, he'd remind me that this is a common psychological effect, both as a consequence of grief and also our brains always wanting to find patterns and meaning in our experiences. So a draft becomes the movement of Cindy. A clattering sound from somewhere else becomes the door handle rattling. And that shadow out of the corner of your eye, which is just a shadow, becomes a beloved, now deceased pet. But it's not always our own pets that we are haunted by, which makes it harder to explain scientifically. A listener to Weird in the Way told me about a strange haunting she experienced in Potton some years ago. Now, she moved into a lovely house in Potton with a long garden, which had a beautiful rose bush at the end of it. And at the time that she moved in, she had no dog. And it wasn't long after arriving and settling in that she began to hear a dog barking. The sound was coming from the end of her garden, near to or right by that rose bush. At first, she thought it was the sound of a neighbour's dog, but she could never see another dog around in the garden next to her when she was out there listening to the barking. Now, this lady did have a cat, and this cat would often sit at the bottom of the garden, staring as if it could see another animal, sometimes reacting, arching its back, or darting forwards. Eventually, she heard the barking so frequently that she asked her neighbour if there was a local dog that she knew, or someone else with a dog, and that was why she could hear that barking. Now, there weren't a lot of neighbouring houses at the time where she lived, and the neighbour looked puzzled. They had no dog, and certainly there wasn't any nearby that she was aware of. But she said that the previous owner had owned a sweet little dog who would bark in the garden and had passed away before that family moved out. The dog, she believed, was buried beneath that rose bush at the end of the garden, just where the barking was heard and where the cat reacted. Now, this wasn't my listener's only encounter with a ghostly dog. Her other encounter took place in Old Warden, which is just a few miles away from Biggleswade. It was some time ago, and it took place in the graveyard near to the large mausoleum of the Ongley family who lived at Shuttleworth. Although the listener was there with others, it was only she who witnessed a large, wolf-like dog appear around the side of the mausoleum. Now, on the blog, weirdintheway.blog, you'll be able to see a photograph of the mausoleum. And everybody here in the audience, there's a picture behind us, and that is the mausoleum. And you can see where the bushes are. That's where the dog kind of appeared from, but around where you can see where those bushes are. So she said that it was a beautiful dog. It was very wolf-like, but it didn't look like any kind of breed of domestic dog that she had ever seen. And the dog's appearance was silent. And it then disappeared just as quietly, seeming to melt back into the shadows that it had come from within those trees and bushes. Now, the interesting thing is that up until a few years back, there was actually a wolf sanctuary in Bedfordshire, and it was actually in a location that was generally kept secret. So there is a very small chance that a wolf was on the loose. However, she said she didn't think it was a wolf. It was bigger than a wolf. Maybe it was some kind of exotic dog that someone was walking, but maybe it was what is known as a graveyard barghest. Now, a barghest is a relative of the Shucks of East Anglia, and it's most commonly associated with Yorkshire, lurking in graveyards, but also down snickets or alleyways. The name barghest could be derived from the words for town ghost, or bur ghost, or borough ghost, but said in a Yorkshire accent, making ghost girst. And having lived in Yorkshire, I can well imagine them saying, Gerst. Did you see that, Gerst? So, the name has also been linked to German Barhergeist, and that means the ghost of the funeral bier. Hence the association with graveyards, and maybe the myth of a hound who will accompany you to the afterlife. Think of Cerberus, the three-headed dog who guarded the underworld in Greek myth, and Anubis in Egyptian legends. The association with an underworld afterlife, being hell, only really came about with Christianity, with them firmly placing the good people in heaven above and the afterlife below being reserved for wrongdoers. The clergy believed that the pagan afterlife was underground, and so that was where all the bad people went. And so the dogs that were once associated with being guardians of the underworld became demon dogs, dragging souls down into hell. Now, the barghest in Yorkshire doesn't just haunt graveyards. It is found in lonely lanes throughout the Dales, where it is associated with magic and ritual thanks to an 1830 poem. And in York, the narrow snickleways and snickets of the town are said to be prowled by the large black dog with sharp claws and fangs. Now, maybe these are just warnings to the young and vulnerable to avoid those narrow places where the unwary could be easily robbed. But one of the things that I'm really interested in about dogs, and it was what Owen and I were talking about earlier, their dual nature, is that there's a lot of folk tales about dogs and stories of, shall we say, strangely otherworldly dogs, which aren't actually negative and aren't about, say, dragging people down to hell. And my friend Tess came up with a great name for that kind of dog. She called them kindred canines. So not all ghostly dogs are evil. There are many tales across the British Isles and beyond of faithful dogs, alive and ghostly, as well as guardian dogs who help those lost or in trouble on dark country roads. There's also the phenomenon of a dog who just adopts you when you're on a walk. Very much a real flesh and bone dog. Or are they? One of my favourite experiences of this kind of dog happened in Dublin a few years back on our way to the Hellfire Club. Now, there are many Hellfire Clubs, and the one that I'm most familiar with, and I'm guessing many of you in the room are, is the one in Buckinghamshire, not too far from here, where the caves beneath the hills at West Wickham near High Wycombe were used in the 18th century as a den of debauchery and occult practices by wealthy aristocrats. And you can go and visit now. You can actually go into those caves, and I really, really want to go. So expect an episode about them next year, maybe. But the Dublin Hellfire Club was a branch of that Wickham Club in the 18th century as well, and it met in the summer house of William Connolly, who was the then Speaker of the Irish Parliament. And this Hellfire Club was on Montpelier Hill, just south of Dublin. And just as in Wickham, there were tales of debauchery and occult practices associated with this house and the club. And this just added to the much earlier legends about the hill, which had an ancient cairn and passage tomb on it. It was claimed that the house was built with stones from the cairn, and that when, within months of that house being completed, its roof was ripped off in a storm, it was said that the devil had done this as punishment for interfering with the cairn. And again, it's another example of where the devil was associated with sort of ancient Bronze Age or earlier structures. So the devil was already associated with the hill and the house long before the toffs turned up with their drinking and magic rituals. The house also had several ghost stories attached to it, and one of them was about a huge black cat, but that will have to be for another episode. But where does this dog come in that I'm talking about? Well, the house was burnt down, and again, on the blog, you'll be able to see some images of inside the Hellfire Club, and here behind us, we've got some images that I took on our visit. It's a really spooky and creepy place. If you are ever in Dublin, I really recommend a visit to the Hellfire Club, and in a minute, you'll see that there's a fantastic view of Dublin from up there. So the house burnt down while it was still being used. Maybe because it was still being used. Just think of all those drunks with candles and just generally, messing around with magic. Once it had burnt down, they moved down the hill to a steward's house and then further away. Ever since, the ruins have stood on the top of the hill as a well-known landmark in Dublin. Now, I visited with my husband Jace and friends about 10 years ago in 2016, and this is where the dog comes in. Now, we walked up the hill towards the ruin on a lovely, sunny August day. And as we wandered the narrow paths flanked by trees and shrubs, there were insects droning, butterflies flitted by. It was beautiful. And it was here along these shady paths that we were adopted by a dog. He just turned up out of nowhere. He was a sandy-coloured Labrador cross, and he appeared to have no owners and had just chosen us as his pack for that afternoon. There was nothing supernatural about this dog. He was very much flesh and blood. I patted him once I'd established that he was friendly. And he just seemed to be escorting us up the hill to the ruins like this was his job. And here's that view I told you about once you're at the top. So once we were at the ruin, he hung around with us for a bit while we were exploring, but then he was tempted away by picnickers and their food. But he still didn't seem to belong to anyone. We couldn't see anybody claiming him. And I won't lie, I had been feeling a little nervous about visiting the Hellfire Club, what with my childhood fear of the devil. And this cheerful dog's presence made me feel a lot safer. Now, there are many stories of dogs accompanying lonely or weary travellers. It's part of a dog's nature to find a pack. And in the past, when dogs were more readily allowed to roam, there seemed to be more of these kindred canines who'd befriend you on a temporary basis. I remember, as a child, neighbourhood dogs who would just rock up to play with you. And then when they'd had enough, they'd just wander off back home. And I'm glad that we do have better welfare now for dogs. But at the time, many of these dogs I remember from my childhood were well-fed and happy and just habitual wanderers. Real-life littlest hobos. And it seems that stories of dogs in folklore are rich with these faithful hounds, wandering helpers, as well as much more chaotic creatures. So, here's our Biggleswade story. Biggleswade has its own chaotic canine folktale, and it's an addendum to the Great Fire of Biggleswade story, but it is an important one. The fire broke out on the morning of the 16th of June, 1785 at the Crown Inn. Most reports say that the cause of the blaze was a careless servant who threw hot ashes into the yard at the Crown, and this caused a nearby cart packed with straw to catch light and slowly smoulder until it was too late and the place was ablaze. Now, I discovered an earlier newspaper report which claimed that the fire was in fact just a terrible accident. It was caused by sparks from a light or lantern, and it had the same effect, basically setting a smouldering fire in a cart, which burnt unnoticed until it was too late. Now, the fire devastated the town and its people. Over a third of Biggleswade was destroyed. Houses, pubs, shops, barns, crops and livestock were obliterated. There appear to have been no actual human fatalities on the day of the fire, though undoubtedly some of the 300 plus people made homeless that day may well have succumbed to disease and premature death as a result in later months. Our chaotic dog comes in as a later addition to the story, which seems to have originated from a vicar who claims he got the tale from an old resident who said he was at the scene of the fire. In this legend, a servant spotting the flames ran to get water from the town pump, and on returning with buckets sloshing, was upended by, and I quote, a mad dog. And this mad dog had appeared from nowhere, it seems, just to thwart the servant's efforts. This dog scampered around, tripped up the servant, and then ran off, and was then never seen again. Now, I'm minded of our Luton demon dog dancing in the flames of the gibbet fire. This Biggleswade dog seems to be slightly less sinister and more of a trickster dog. If there was no dog at the scene of the fire, and no contemporary reports mention one, it's interesting that it was added around 50 years later. What does the dog bring to the story? An excuse for why the fire got so out of hand and destroyed so much of the town? Maybe some comic relief amidst the tragedy? Or is it tied to a much older need or habit we have for adding dogs to tales about fire and mayhem? Biggleswade, Luton, Bungay and Blythburgh all have tales of dogs in the midst of disaster, destruction and flames. But I wanted to finish today's episode with an exploration of folklore dogs from a different angle. And it's a fantastic story from Owen Staton.
Don't chew on that, Max.
Cooper loves that chew, too.
Oh, now he's into Cooper's food. Wow, he is loving it. What do you feed Cooper?
Blue Buffalo Life Protection Formula. He never leaves a crumb. I love it because it's made with high-quality protein, nutrient-rich fruits and veggies, and wholesome whole grains.
Looks like we're switching to Blue.
Blue Buffalo foods are made with the superior ingredients your dog needs to thrive. Can your dog food say that? Visit feedbluefood.com to learn more.
The Who's Down in Who Newville were making their list, but some didn't know Walmart has the best brands for their gifts.
What about toys? Do they have brands kids have been wanting all year?
Yep, Barbie, Tony's, and Lego. Gifts that will make them all cheer.
Do you mean they have all the brands I adore?
They have Nintendo, Nespresso, Apple, and more.
What about...
So the Who answered questions from friends till they were blue. Each one listened and shouted, from Walmart? Who knew? Shop gifts from top brands for everyone on your list in the Walmart app.
Far away in the land of Wales, there lived a prince. His name was Llywelyn Mawr. He was the greatest prince Wales had ever known. It would take 3 or 4 men just to lift his sword that he carried in battle. He was the wisest man anyone had ever known. He would settle disputes with just a word. It was said that he knew every song that had ever been sung, every tale that had ever been told. every poem that had ever been performed. And Llywelyn was the most popular, the wisest, the bravest, the truest prince Wales had ever known. But he also knew tragedy. You see, many years before, he had rowed out to sea to meet a French king who had given him his daughter in marriage. Her name was Eleanor. She was as fair as the morning sun, and her and Llywelyn were absolutely and forever in love. But like many people in those times, when she gave birth to their daughter Gwenllian, she passed away just hours later, leaving Llywelyn as heartbroken as he could possibly be. It was like his soul had fallen out of his body. And although he had the Princess Gwenllian to hold to his breath, Eleanor had gone. Wherever he went, he took the princess with him. If he went to war, she came in the tent behind him. If he went hunting, he would always take her to be looked after, for she was but a babe. But it is lonely at the top, and Llywelyn needed more friends. And he had the greatest friend of all. He had his hound, Gelert. Gelert was as large as a calf. It was said that if Gelert opened his mouth, he could swallow the head of a man whole. Gelert was as brave can be. Wherever Llywelyn went, Gelert went. When Llywelyn ate his food, Gelert would sat at his feet. When Llywelyn slept, Gelert would sleep on the ground. He would hunt with him, eat with him. Gelert was one of Llywelyn's favourite friends ever. And it was on a day just like today, when Llywelyn, Gelert, the Princess Gwenllian, and all of Llywelyn's army had marched into the middle of Wales to face a foe, one of their greatest foes, in a place called Dinas Emrys, a place so dark they say the sun only shines there for an hour a day. And then at the height of midsummer, Llywelyn sat in his tent, and far away he could hear the distant drums of his enemy. Gelert sat at the ground, and the baby Gwenllian in her cot. Gelert, said Llywelyn, tomorrow we will fight a battle that will make the future of our people. But tonight we sleep. Tonight we get ready for war. And tonight, Princess Gwenllian, you will know the last night of peace for a while. He was just about lying in his bed when suddenly the flap to the tent opened and in rushed a messenger. My lord, the enemy are upon us. Get your sword, don your armour, my lord. It is time to make war. Suddenly Llywelyn could hear the sound of horses' hooves running over the mountains. He could hear the clash of steel. He could hear the sound of battle and the cries of the dying. He picked up his sword. He started to put on his armour, put on his helmet. Gelert, come! We must go to battle! We must go to battle now! And it was then that he realised there was no one to look after the baby Gwenllian. The army was at war. The battle was just outside. And there was no one to look after the princess. Gelert, I must fight. I give you what is dear to me. I give you what I hold in my heart. With every last beat of the heart in your chest. Look after my daughter. And with that, Llywelyn was gone. The battle lasted until the sun started to set the next day. The cries of the dying filled the valley. But then, only then, the cries of the triumphant prince crossed the valleys of Wales. Yes! Came Llywelyn. Yes! I have won the battle. At last we are free. Our enemies are banished. Tonight we celebrate. He came into the tent like a lion. But then he saw something he didn't expect. The Princess Gwenllian's cot had tipped over. There were tapestries hanging in the tent, and they were torn on the ground. There was blood. And of the baby there was no sign. Llywelyn looked around frantically. Gwenllian, Gwenllian! And there was nothing. And then from around the foot of the bed came Gelert, the faithful hound, looked after the princess. But Gelert's mouth was caked with blood. And then Llywelyn's anger knew no bounds. For that, in that moment when he was needed most, Gelert had betrayed the prince and slain the Princess Gwenllian. He walked forward, his head bowed in supplication, his tail wagging. And Llywelyn lifted his sword above his head, and in a scream that echoed through the mountains, he brought it down hard. And killed Gelert there and then. The hound fell to the ground, its wound was mortal. And Llywelyn slumped to his knees, blood falling from his sword. He started to sob, but his sobs were joined by the cry of a baby. Llywelyn stood, turned around and looked. He looked frantically under the bed. He stepped over the dead dog. And there he saw it. The Princess Gwenllian, safe and unharmed. He pulled the baby and picked it up. She was as well as she could be. Her face was pink. She was crying from hunger, but there was not a wound on her body. And then he saw it, reaching out from under the bottom of the bed, the paw of a giant wolf. He pulled at the paw, and out from under the bed came the biggest wolf Llywelyn had ever seen. And then realization hit him. Realization that whilst he was fighting a battle over the hills, another battle had been fought here in the tent. You see, a wolf, attracted by the smell of the babe, had come into the tent. And Gelert had fought the wolf. Gelert had fought the wolf with everything he had to protect the baby. And the wolf was dead. But now, Llywelyn had killed Gelert. They say that Llywelyn never smiled again. He carried Gelert's body to a place that's now called Beidd Gelert, Gelert's grave, and buried him under an oak tree. And there is his grave to this day. The motive above it, here lies Gelert, the most faithful companion that anyone would ever know. But a few weeks after, Llywelyn was killed in an ambush, and what was great fell away from the lands of Wales. But ever since that day, the hound Gelert has become a symbol of faithfulness, of courage, and of the true nature of the greatest friends of man, the hound. And that, my friends, is the sad story of Gelert. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you so much, Owen. It's one of my favourite stories, and it's a story found, I mean, obviously, Wales has really taken it to its heart, and you can go and see that. That grave exists, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, you can go and see it. But it's actually a story that's found across the whole of Europe, isn't it?
Yeah,
versions.
It's amazing. There's versions of it in Argentina. Yeah. There's versions of it in Russia, in many places in Europe. And Yeah, like many of these stories, it's a story within a story, and the story of Gellet, if you care to look, the beginning of the folktale is almost as interesting as the tale itself. So it's well worth taking a look if you get a chance.
It's brilliant. And if you listen to Time Between Times podcast that Owen created and presents, there's, I think, at least one telling of it, maybe more than one.
Yeah, I tell it very early on in the series, and it's one that I do come back to. It's one of the most famous Welsh tales, I think.
It's an amazing story. Now, we do have a very short amount of time. If anybody has got any questions about ghostly dogs, demon dogs, or wants to share a very quick story about a dog, and we've got Izzy here with the roving mic. If you put your hand up, if anybody would like to either ask a question or has got a short story to tell. Brilliant. Yeah, you go and find, because Izzy, it's very hard for me to see actually with the lights.
So lady just down here.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
It's a really weird, queer little short story about a dog, demon, don't know. It was in a pub, and it was only a couple of weeks back. We'd only just got to the pub, so I hadn't had a drink. 4 of us sitting around a table, same sort of table as on the stage. And I saw like the top back of a Labrador dog. Didn't see the rest of it, just its back going past the table, and I could hear its nails clicking on the pub floor. I thought, fine. And then I realised the door hadn't opened and there was no dog that came out the other side past the table, so I saw a ghostly dog's back. That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Can you say which pub it was?
It's called the Axe and Compass in a place called Hemmingford Abbot, so it's only in Huntingdonshire.
Yeah. Wow, just in case anybody wants to go and see the ghostly dog's back. But actually, what's really interesting, there was an uncanny, during Halloween, Uncanny, the podcast that Danny Robbins presents on the BBC, they were running little short ghostly stories, and there was one about the back of a cat. So this seems to be actually more common than we realise, where only parts of an animal are seen, not the whole animal. But it's interesting you heard the clicking of the claws as well. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Did you ask about it at all when you were there? Or?
Well, the bar is only a stone's throw from the table, and the barmaid, who's there regularly, heard me say it, and she was looking at me like, she said, no, there was no dog here, so I don't know what the history is. At some point, maybe I'll try and research and see.
Yeah, please do.
Or if I was just hallucinating, who knows?
But yeah, if you do, let us know what you find out. Yeah, fantastic. Does anybody else have a ghostly story or a question? Or here, right at the front again. Yes.
It's just an observation. I thought it was really interesting when you said about, obviously we're talking about stories about dogs, but also how there are many stories about cats, and that sometimes the dogs morph into cats. And being from Cornwall, we obviously have the very, very famous story of the Beast of Bodmin Moor, which was when I was growing up in Cornwall in the 90s. We still got regular news reports about sightings of the cat on Bodmin Moor. And I just wondered whether that is a geographical thing, that some areas have dogs and some areas have cats, or whether it's a change over time, or just kind of how these things go between the two.
It's such an interesting question, and it was when I was talking to Dr. Francis Young, and he really knows his stuff about medieval history, and earlier as well, really early medieval history. And he also specialises in Eastern Europe, and Lithuania actually is somewhere that he knows loads about. And it was him that explained to me that when these stories were first being sort of collected, they weren't just dogs. These were beasts that could shapeshift, and this was seen as quite normal. And then they seemed to fix on being dogs for most of the medieval, early modern, right up until Victorian times. But then in the 20th century, these areas that have these dog stories seem to morph into cat stories. Now, for Bodmin, we have the sort of almost an urban legend, but I think it's probably 99% true, that we've got somebody admitting that they had a circus and they were having to give up their cats, and they released some on Bodmin Moor. And so I think some of the sightings probably are real cats, possibly the one on Bodmin Moor is, but then others seem to be taking the place of, like you say, the folk tales about dogs. So it's really fascinating. And like I say, literally just 4 miles away from here in Potton, there is this Potton panther which has come back again this year, supposedly a big black panther-like cat. Now, in the 90s, we know that there was sightings, and the sightings started off as being a big black cat and then morphed into something that was described as being tan-coloured, the size of an Alsatian. And then it was revealed that somebody had been shaving their Alsatian to give it so that it still had a big fluffy bit around its neck, and it had a little tuft on its tail, but the rest of the body was really cropped short. And it was this dog that looked like a lion that was being seen. So that, again, when you have people hoaxing, then that just muddies the waters. And just to let you know, there's somebody in the audience today, I'm not going to call on them now because we're doing an episode on this next year, where we're going to talk about an amazing hoax that involves a dog-like creature. It is fascinating. All of that in the mix, ancient folklore, real animals being released into the wild, and then people hoaxing. It's really hard to work out what's what. We've got time for probably one more if anybody else has got a question. Oh, yeah, right. Oh, that's nice and easy.
I have one that happened to me earlier this year.
Oh, wow.
Could have been a flesh and blood dog, could have been your kindred canine, I don't know. Could have been something more spooky. But I went to a paranormal festival in Wiltshire. I'm not much of a camper, but we stayed in a camper van. In the early hours of the morning, I needed to find the facilities. Yeah. So I got up and I went out in the darkness. I forgot my glasses, so I can't see at a distance. So I managed to find the toilets and stuff. When I was coming back, I felt a little bit scared. And I heard a padding behind me, and there was a black dog, which did actually frighten me slightly. But it basically accompanied me all the way back to my camper van and then disappeared. Not disappeared, but went off somewhere else. Yeah. And I don't remember seeing that dog the next day anywhere. So maybe that was my little guiding canine, or
amazing.
Could have been flesh and blood, could have been Black Shuck, I don't know. But
I love it. And Wiltshire does have dog stories as well as cat stories as well. So amazing. I love it. That's a great one to kind of end on the talking about kindred canines and ghostly dogs. And I just want to thank all of you for coming today. Thank you so much. If somebody had told me 2.5 years ago when I started Weird in the Wade that I'd be selling out the Bigg Theatre, that people would actually want to come and actually see me recording a podcast, I would not have believed you. So thank you so much for coming. I'd also like to thank Owen for his wonderful storytelling. I needed something to kind of contrast with, and Owen has been absolutely perfect, as I knew he would. And I'd also like to thank the Bigg Theatre and also my colleagues from the BBC, Lucy and Izzy, who have been doing the recording today. And yeah, just thank you for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to Weird in the Wade's very special Christmas live recording. I'd like to wish all of you a wonderful festive season, however you are celebrating. And Weird in the Wade will be back on the 5th of January with a really creepy and strange ghost story from Brighton again to celebrate 12th night. Now, I do have a couple of announcements to make. First of all, if you are at a loose end on the 29th of December, I will be holding an online ghost storytelling event for Winterval or Betwixtmas. There'll be a link in the show description to the Eventbrite page where you can sign up if you would like to come and join me for some storytelling. And on the 9th of January in Biggleswade at the Bigg Theatre, if you can get there, I will be holding an evening of dark history. I will be taking you through Biggleswade's past, looking at some of the more unusual and sinister stories from that area. And I will also be joined by a very special guest on stage to talk about a haunting which is happening now in Biggleswade. So if you'd like to come along to that event, again, in the show description, there's a link to the Bigg Theatre website where you can find out more, and there's a link to get tickets. Again, wishing you all a wonderful Merry Christmas and a very, very Happy New Year.
There's fishing. And then there's fishing. Out here, you're after dinner. Online, hackers are after your data. They'll bait you with fake emails, lookalike sites, anything to lure you in. But with Cisco Duo's end-to-end phishing-resistant access control, every login, every device, every user stays protected. Looks like no one's biting today. Cisco Duo. Phishing season is over. Learn more at duo.com.
Hey, Ryan Reynolds here. Wishing you a very happy half-off holiday, because right now Mint Mobile is offering you the gift of 50% off unlimited. To be clear, that's half price, not half the service. And Mint is still premium unlimited wireless for a great price. So that means a half day, yeah? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.